Welcome to Purpose. I'm your host, Corie Clark. I'm just a normal girl who decided to go for it. I created a thriving business from the ground up without sacrificing my sanity, and I believe that you can do the same. You were created on purpose, for a purpose, and I fully believe you can turn that purpose into profit. Each week, I'm going to bring you practical advice to help you live your life and grow your business on purpose. Welcome back to another episode of Purpose. I'm your host, Corie Clark, and like I mentioned in my last episode, I wanted to bring you a bonus episode to share with you some of my tips for homeschooling as an entrepreneur and working from home with kids in your home. So, with everything that's going on with the virus and being quarantined and so many people having to homeschool their kids now, I really just wanted to take this opportunity to bring my knowledge, my advice, my tips for you. I'm not perfect by any means, but I have homeschooled for 12 years. And so I just felt like I wanted to share some of the things that we've done. Now, I'm not going to go into like curriculum or any of that stuff. These are honestly they have nothing to do with that and your actual schooling. But these are things that you can start implementing to help lighten the load and the burden that you have, and to really just make a peaceful space in your home for your kids, a peaceful space in your mind, and get through this time together. So, this is also written as a blog post, so I will link to that in the show notes in case you want to check out the post and share it with your friends or whatever. We've got it on Pinterest and all that good stuff. But I wanted to read these off to you, maybe expand on them a little bit, and then I'm going to share some of my working from home tips. So I just want to remind you guys that, we really are all in this together. And when you feel like you're not good enough to homeschool your kids, or you're not smart enough, or, you don't have a teaching credential, I want you to let all of that out the window. I don't have a teaching credential, and those kind of things do creep up in any homeschool mom's mind. So you're not alone in thinking that, but I want you to remember that you are your child's parent. There's no one that knows your child as much as you do, or as well as you do. There's no teacher that knows your child or loves your child like you do. And so I want you to remember that. I want you to let your mother or father, whoever's listening to this, I want you to let those parental instincts kick in, and to really learn to listen to your heart when you're dealing with things as far as helping them with their education. But I do have 10 tips, and so let's get into the tips. So the first tip is to release any expectations. So if I learned anything these last 12 years, it's that expectations are really not ever met, and rarely. I don't even know, except for the fact that you are going to go to bed at night and you're going to wake back up the next morning and have to do it all again. That's kind of the only one that's going to get met. But I want you to give your kids some grace, and give yourself some grace. If this is your first time experiencing homeschooling, and this wasn't really your choice, then this is new for your kids too, not just you. So give your whole family some grace and let go of those expectations. Okay, number 2 is don't try to recreate school at home. So the school system is created the way it is because, there's a lot of reasons, but I want you to think of the average teacher who's having to wrangle 20, 30 plus kids, and then you've got the whole school full of hundreds of kids. The reason there is a strict bell schedule is to manage all that and to make sure that they get through all the things they need to get through. But when they're in school for 7 hours, they're not doing 7 hours of schoolwork. So I don't want you guys to feel like you have to do 7 hours of schoolwork because they're not doing that at school. There is plenty of time, like lining up between classes, lining up after recess, before recess, lining up before and after lunch, and, waiting for kids to turn papers in. And there's a lot of busy work. So the actual hours of schoolwork is not the same as the time that they're gone from you. And so trying to give them 7 hours of structured, bell schedule schoolwork is just not it's just not going to work in your house. You and your kids both are going to be exhausted. As far as my kids and their schoolwork, and they're older, but after 12 years, what I've learned is, the actual work that they need to get done can usually get done in a few hours a day, and when they learn to focus themselves and get it done, that's when you'll start to see the time lessen. And so just don't try to recreate school at home. It's really going to exhaust all of you. Okay, so my third tip is to let them sleep in. I'm sure there's some people that are like, oh my gosh, I wish my kids would sleep in. Maybe you have early risers. But if your kids do sleep in, let them sleep in. They need it, especially right now. It's going to help lower their stress levels. It's going to help boost their immune system. They need the sleep. And if you let them sleep in, and maybe let them wake up on their own, or maybe, set a new wake up time, but maybe it's an hour later than normal, it's going to give you some free time yourself as well. I always loved my mornings, and I still love my mornings when I'm up before the kids and I can kind of get a handle on the day before they wake up. I'm in a better mood. And, I go through my devotions and I do my whole morning mindset routine, and I'm just happier. How many times have we been woken up by our kids and, it's just like frustrating, or if you wake up and it's time to wake up the kids and everybody's just go, 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 it's exhausting and stressful. And so let them sleep in a little bit and give yourself that time alone in the morning to really fill your cup so that you can pour yourself out to them and to your business. Okay, number 4 is give them chores. So I know, or at least what I've seen, is with kids being in school for so many hours a day and they're in sports and they have homework, a lot of kids really don't do a ton of chores because they really don't have the time. So we kind of made a deal with our kids when we started homeschooling. Like, hey, I'm going to be doing this, so I need your help around the house. And my kids do a lot of chores. Now, depending on your kids' ages, you're going to have to decide what they can and can't do. But if you have them do something on a daily basis, we have like 3 days a week where they do quite a bit of chores, vacuuming and mopping and that kind of stuff. And then the other 2 days are a little less and they have to keep their rooms clean and make their beds every day. That's kind of just like a given. But give them some chores that they haven't normally done. This is going to give them something to do to help fill up that time during the day. And it's going to take the load off of you and get some of your housework done. And so honestly, once we kind of came up with our little chore chart for the kids, I just made it myself, literally just typed it up. And in fact, today I made a whole new one. The 18 and 19-year-old now have chores again because I'm like, hey, we're all stuck in this house together as a family. Everybody's chipping in so that we can get through this. We're a team. And so I just used one of the notepads that we have in the shop, wrote out all the chores that they're doing every day, and it's up to them to get it done. And it's so freeing, and it kept them busy all day today because before this, we were just down to our youngest doing the chores because the other 2 are working, and, Morgan has her own business. Parker was working pretty much part-time to full-time, but now he's home. So I'm like, oh, okay, if everybody's home, everybody's pitching in, everybody's got to have something to do. So we'll usually start our day with breakfast and then chores. And my youngest, Brody, he's the only one left doing schoolwork. He's in high school. My other 2 have graduated, but he doesn't really start his schoolwork until 9 or 10, depending on what time the day gets going. So, okay, number 5 is to designate a family quiet time. Now that my kids are older, I don't really have to do this anymore, but this was a lifesaver when my kids were younger. And we would do the breakfast thing and the chore thing, and then they had to go to their rooms, and there was a set time every single day. They had to be in their rooms for 45. Once they got older, it was more like an hour. If your kids are younger, you could probably do 30 minutes. And they had to just lay on their bed and read. And they got to read what they wanted. And I think that was one of the reasons it worked so well. I wasn't trying to force them to read a certain book. I let them read what they want. And they had to set their own timers. And then they weren't allowed to come out until the timer went off. And it was like an added little quiet time it's like we got through our morning routine, and then we had this quiet time where they were focused on their books, and I got to get some work done and kind of get my day going. And so honestly, it was a lifesaver. And for those of you that need it, maybe you need to do it twice a day. Maybe you need like a half hour in the morning and a half hour after lunch or something like that, just to give yourself some time. Give them a timer, let them set it themselves, and tell them you can't come out and talk to me until this timer goes off. Okay, so number 6 is to create a loose schedule. So if you're taking my advice and you're letting them sleep in, you might not always be starting at the same time. Or maybe you do. Our day really doesn't ever start at the exact same time. And any of the times I tried to make like a super strict, like, okay, 9 a.m. is this, and 10 a.m. is this, and 10:30 is this. What happens is you might get off a little bit, and then it's kind of hard to get back on track. So for me, it was easier to have more of a rhythm. It's breakfast, and then it's chores, and then it's reading, and then it's math, and then it's lunch, and then it's history, or, whatever subjects you're doing with your kids. Just come up with a rhythm so that you're not feeling so bound to a strict schedule. Because one thing that I'm sure you've realized by now, and if you haven't, you will soon, is, you really just can't stick to that strict of a schedule, because your kids are going to have questions, or you're going to have to look something up for them, or you're going to have to try and figure something out. And honestly, like, there are no days that go perfectly as planned. So if you have a loose schedule or a rhythm, it's going to be a lot easier for you to stick to that and to just, know like, hey, it's 12 o'clock. We're all hungry. Time to stop whatever we're doing, and let's just eat some lunch before we try to get back into anything. And just be okay with that, because this season will hopefully pass soon. If it doesn't, I promise you guys will get into it. You'll get into the groove. You'll figure out your thing for your family. And then it's kind of like when you're raising a baby, you'll get into your groove, and then something will change and you'll have to figure out a new groove. It's like when you're raising your babies when they're super young, it's like you finally get into that schedule and they're sleeping through the night, and then they go through a growth spurt, or then they drop a nap, or, and it's like you have to start all over. And that will happen with you guys. Things change. And so I think the more you try to just be open and fluid right now, the easier those transitions are going to be over the next few weeks or months, however long this ends up lasting. Okay, tip number 7 is to give your kids control of their schoolwork. Now, this might not necessarily look the same for everyone. If your kids are really young and you're really having to be like teaching them reading and teaching them math, this wasn't necessarily something that we did when they were super young, but we did show them, like when they were really young, they knew what schoolwork they needed to get done by the end of the day. And so if your kids are a little bit older and they know how to read, they know how to write, they know how to answer the questions on their worksheets, or to follow along on an online training, or whatever, whatever it is you're doing to teach them. If they have schoolwork to do, tell them that when they finish it, they can do what they want. I mean, within reason, whatever's, within the rules of your house. But honestly, like, once my kids knew that like they were in control of how long it took them to get their schoolwork done, it helped them to stay focused. So when they can see, like at the beginning of the day, hey, you've got, these 5 things that you need to do today, and when they're done, you can do what you want. You can play video games for an hour. You can, get on a Skype call with your friends, whatever their reward is. But when you let them know that, it honestly helps them to stay focused. And I really think that's what helped my kids. Like, my 2 oldest graduated a year early because they were constantly doing like everything they needed to in a timely fashion. And throughout their high school years, they were able to add classes that all the classes that they would have taken their senior year, they took over those 3 years and graduated a year early. So when you teach them to, focus on their work and to know that they get something when they're finished, like they get to have their own time, it really does help them to stay focused. I think when they don't understand and they don't see an end in sight, then they just end up taking longer, procrastinating like we all do. So sorry. That was definitely, I think, one of the best things that we ever did is, and especially with my high schooler now, it's, his classes are harder because they're high school. And, but he knows if he stays focused and gets his work done, then he can play video games with his friends. And that makes him happy and that gets him finished quickly. Okay, tip number 8, let them explore what they love. So if your kids don't have schoolwork, it's kind of weird because I've heard from some families that they've been given schoolwork and structure and a schedule and all this stuff. And then other people are like, we weren't given anything. Like, we don't even know what we're doing. So if your kids have schoolwork, well, either way, whether they do or not, this is an opportunity to find out what they love to do and what they want to learn more about. So if your kids have free time and you're like, okay, well, their schoolwork's done in 3 hours, now what do I do? Find out the things that they want to learn about, because most of the time in like traditional school, they don't get that freedom to, maybe they want to learn some cool new magic trick on YouTube, or maybe they want to learn how to play the guitar or play the keyboard or something. There are so many free trainings online that your kids can do. And sometimes they don't even realize that they're interested in these other things because they've never been given the option or the time. So it's a great time to really let them explore the things that they love to do. Okay, number 9, I think this might be my favorite one, is to let them be chefs. So have your kids make their own breakfast and lunch. You guys, I have not made my kids lunch in I don't even know how, in years. And really not their breakfast either, unless we're having like a big family breakfast. But if your kids are old enough to make their own lunch, or if you have multiple kids, this is a great time to like implement the buddy system. If your oldest is like, let's say 12 and your youngest is 6, have your 12-year-old be the buddy of the 6-year-old and they get to work together making their lunches. The 12-year-old helps the 6-year-old with their school. It is a great system to implement. I have friends who have lots of kids, like we're talking like 7, 8, 9 kids. And that is how they kind of survived their homeschool years, was the oldest had the older kids had a younger buddy. So if you have multiple kids, see if this is a way that you can get the oldest and the youngest to team up and take some of the workload off of you that you have for your youngest. But let them make their own breakfast and lunch. And give yourself a little extra time. It's going to really, honestly, I see this time as teaching your kids so many things that you wouldn't have the time to teach them when they're gone at school all the time. Okay, and my final tip is to enjoy this time, because obviously it's stressful, but really try to enjoy it and try to create small moments each day for fun, for creativity, for laughing, for just being silly. And if you're intentional about creating a fun moment each day, you guys are going to get through this season with so much more joy. They're going to remember those moments. They're not going to remember the stress and the worry. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, I got to stay home with my mom and we had so much fun together. So try to create those moments every day, because I promise you, before you know it, they are going to be grown and gone, and you're probably going to miss them. So as stressful as this seems, I think it's comforting knowing that we're all going through this together. Obviously, I've already been through this myself as far as the homeschooling goes. So I don't feel as much stress as some of you are feeling right now, but I wanted to share these tips with you so that you could approach your days with a little bit less stress, a little bit less worry, and just remember, like I said at the beginning, these are your kids. Okay, the school system does not own your kids. These are your kids, and you get to decide what's best for them. And you get to create a space that is peaceful and that is joyful. And, this is not going to set them back. I promise you, this is not going to set them back. They're going to be okay. They're going to get through this. And I think it's more important that you give them grace and give yourself grace and create an atmosphere that is loving and kind and energetic. It's more important to do those things than to give them an amazing education. They're going to learn what they need to learn, I promise. Okay, so those are my homeschool tips, but I also wanted to share a few of my work from home tips because it is a little crazy and a little different. And I always laugh when entrepreneurs and, some of the time management and productivity gurus are like, time block your day, because I'm like, you must not have kids at home because you're getting interrupted every 15 minutes. So I'm definitely not a fan of the major time blocks. Unless your kids are older and they can stay in their room for 90 minutes or something, go for it. But it's time to let all of those rituals and all the things that you used to do, it's time to let those go. Let them out the window. You can have them back later when your kids go back to school. But for right now, it's just time to embrace the fact that your kids are home. And if you want to continue to run your business, you're going to have to find that new rhythm or that new schedule. So I've been running my business for actively since it started really growing and taking off for 6 years, but I was doing other things on the side before that. So here are some of my tips that I have. Okay. So first, you need to be flexible. And we kind of talked about this with the homeschool tips. You need to be flexible. And it's really going to depend on how old your kids are, what activities they're doing in the day, what they can do on their own. But you've got to just be flexible, come up with a plan. It's okay. I usually, I come up with my plan A and know that whatever that turns into, if it turns into plan B or C or D or whatever, that I'm not going to die. This is not going to mess us up. It's not going to mess me up. It's not going to mess my kids up. I definitely start my days planning as though anything's possible. I do plan and approach my day okay, I'm going to get this done and I'm going to get this done and I'm going to email this person. I plan it as if I'm going to accomplish all of it, but then I don't beat myself up when I don't. Because I know the reality is I'm probably not going to get it all done. But I think it's really important to know what you need to get done and create some sort of plan for yourself to do it. And I have a link to a more broken down blog post that I'm going to put in the show notes for you guys so that you can kind of see. I have a picture of my planner there and how I fill out my planner to plan my day. But part of my evening routine is to prep for the day before. So I want you guys, if you don't do that already, then tonight, after listening to this episode, tonight, I want you to sit down. And if you have a planner, pull out your planner. If you don't, just pull out a sheet of paper and write down some of the things that you know you need to do tomorrow. So I have a picture of that Obviously, I can't show you that on a podcast. But here's how I plan my day. First, I do a brain dump. So in my purposeful planner, there is a brain dump section. There's a brain dump section actually in all of the planners. And I write out all the things that I need to get done, the things I want to get done, just anything and everything. There's no rules for the brain dump. You get to write whatever you want in there. But then I look at those things and I'll star or circle the 3 most important that I have to get done. So I always have a top 3. Every morning I have a top 3, and those are the things I have to get done first before I do anything else on that list. And that really gives you like this sense of accomplishment. I don't know about you, but I like to cross stuff off. I love to make lists and cross stuff off. That's honestly like how the Purposeful Planner was born, is because I had lists everywhere. And I created a planner that had a space for all of those lists in one pretty place. Okay, and then in the schedule part, I start by actually filling in the things that I know that we have to do. When breakfast is going to be, when lunch is going to be, when dinner is going to be, all the things like appointments I have, coaching calls, anything like that, those get put in first. Those are like the solid chunks that don't get moved. They're there first. Obviously, you're not going to have a ton of that kind of stuff right now. I would normally suggest that you put in church and put in your midweek stuff and put in your kids' sports and those kind of things. But for right now, maybe you can start the habit of using a planner when there's a little bit less work to do in it. But anyways, so I use that schedule space to write down the things that have to get done. And then in between those is kind of where I'll put my little time blocks. But I definitely don't work in like 2-hour chunks. When my kids were really little, honestly, I just worked in like 15-minute chunks, and that's why my Simplicity Project book is all based on like simplifying your life in just 15 minutes a day. Because if you have little kids, or if you've ever had little kids, that there's probably not 15 minutes that goes by without you being interrupted. And so if you set up this like 90-minute workflow, and you're interrupted every 15 minutes, you're not going to be as focused anyways. And so for me, what I have found is setting up my day in smaller chunks. Now my kids are older, so I can do bigger chunks, but I still get interrupted. My teenagers walk up and they want to ask me something, and I don't have like a separate office that I can close the door on. So it's definitely something that happens for me on a daily basis. I'm interrupted all day, and it's fine. It is what it is. And so what I do is I will, look at a task, figure out how long it's going to take me, and set my timer for that long. And when my kids were really little, I would set the timer for 15 minutes, just like how I would tell the kids to set their timer for reading. And I would say, okay, you cannot interrupt me until this timer goes off, so that I could just have 15 minutes of focused work. And so if that's all you can get right now, it's better than nothing. And if you have like your spouse home to help, then maybe you can do some bigger ones, like a 30-minute chunk, like I'm going to the room for 30 minutes, keep the kids out, get 30 minutes of focus work done, and then head out and check on the family and see what they need from you. Because it really is something where your kids are going to need something from you. Remember, like this is all new to them too. And so it's definitely going to take like a lot of give and take from each other to get through this. But I promise you can still get good chunks of stuff done in smaller like chunks of time, and eventually your kids will go back to school or whatever it is that they end up doing after this, and you'll have those bigger chunks of time. But for now, instead of being frustrated that you don't have 2 hours or an hour and a half, take the time you do have and just be proactive and get some stuff done during it. Another great thing that you can do, and now most of you that are listening, you probably already work from home at some point, or maybe you don't. Maybe you work out of the house and you have a side hustle, but it's a really good idea to have a set time that you are going to stop working, especially with the way these days are kind of all running together right now because of the quarantine. For us, I'm like, I literally today was like, it's Monday, but then 3 hours into the day, I was like, what day is it? I really didn't know that it was Monday. I was thinking it was Wednesday. But anyways, days are running together. Give yourself a time to cut off the work. And especially like if you're a workaholic, like I love to work. I love my work. I could work all day, every day. I could work into the night because I really do love it. And so if I don't like cut myself off at a certain time, I could end up working way too long. And for me, it can be like a way of escape. So if that's something that you do, it's really important that you set a time that you shut down your computer, walk away from it. It'll all be there for you tomorrow morning. And then another thing is make sure you're taking some time for yourself throughout the day. You know, get out of the house if you can, go for a walk. At this point, we're still allowed to leave and go for walks. Or just go in your backyard, get some sunshine, meditate, read something that's just like for pleasure, like not some, self-help book, or just, give yourself some moments to just like break away from the work and the schoolwork and all of that kind of stuff. Be prepared for different seasons. Like once we're through this, and if your kids are still home, I know I've heard like some schools are just like not even going to go back this year. So even if the quarantine's lifted and your kids are still home, really start to learn like what your seasons are like with work. Like if you've got a busy week coming up with work, make sure you're like pouring into your kids before that, giving them some extra time, spending a little less time working, giving them more time. Because honestly, like that's how you find that work-life balance. So many people say, oh, work-life balance is just a myth. There's no such thing. But I really think there is a thing, because I do believe you can find work-life balance, but balancing is something that is not rigid. If you're balancing on a surfboard or a skateboard or something, you're always moving and shifting. You're shifting depending on the wave that's coming or whatever. And so if you can approach your life like that and be looking ahead at what's coming and seeing how you need to shift and what part of your life needs a little bit more attention from you, that's how you find that balance. And sometimes the balance looks like you're heavy into work and you're not spending quite as much time as with your kids, but that's okay, because as soon as that lifts, then you're pouring more time into your kids and less into your business. And so really just looking at your life that way and learning to know what's coming up as far as your work schedule goes, know what's ahead, and really knowing when you can pour extra of yourself into your kids, when you can pour extra into yourself or into your spouse, so that when you are being pulled away from work, they're not like really suffering. They don't even really care because they just got so much from you the week before. So those are my tips for this whole new homeschool, working from home with kids life. And, it's not going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be easy for any of us. It's weird for us to even have our 19-year-old home. And it's weird to, he's usually working or he's off with his friends. And it's just, it's new and different for us. And so just remember to give yourself grace, give your kids grace, give your spouse grace. This is such a new, uncharted season for all of us. And, it's not worth getting frustrated and stressed at this time. You need to be protecting your health and your family's health. And stress brings your immunity system down. And so do the things that you need to do to alleviate your stress, to get lots of sleep. I mean, you have the time. Let your kids sleep in. You sleep in if you need to, Really just take care of yourselves and use this time as an opportunity to reconnect with your family, to reconnect with your kids, to reconnect with yourself and know what you want to do moving forward with your business, with your kids. Maybe you decide you want to keep them home and homeschool from now on. You never know what's going to happen through this chaos, but I believe that we can all find opportunity in it. And I believe we can all come out of it even stronger and better than we were going into it. So If you have any questions at all about this kind of stuff, I am always happy to talk about it. You can send me a DM on Instagram. That's the best way to get in touch with me. I have a free private community that I'll link in this episode in the show notes if you want to join that to connect with other female entrepreneurs going through this time. And I would just be happy to help support you in any way that I can. So if you felt like this episode was beneficial, if there was anything that stood out to you, I would love to know about it. Screenshot your screen. Screenshot this episode and share it on Instagram and tag me, because I would love to see who's listening and share what your biggest takeaway is. And I would love if you could go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review, because that's what helps other people discover the show. And I really just want to use this opportunity to help serve more people. You know, it's going to be a big, crazy year. Whether this is over in 2 weeks or if it's over in 2 months, either way, like, this is completely shifting our lives and our businesses. And I just want to do what I can to support you and any of your friends or business besties or anyone that you feel like could benefit from this. So I appreciate you. I love you. I pray that you are safe and healthy and happy. And I will see you next week on the next episode.